Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us yet again on another beautiful Sunday to talk about Bitcoin. We have a lot to get through today, guys. I'm really proud to introduce you to the special guest. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and check out the website again, guys. As usual, we are screen sharing the CryptoCast.network website, where you guys will find our YouTube channel, iTunes, RSS, Instagram, and all of our good links there. And of course, we are also have some shirts up there, some merchandise for you guys to check out if you want to support the channel. And if you guys really want to support the channel, we'd really appreciate it if you guys could check out our donation link. We have our screen sharing here on the website. Because this, of course, is a community supported YouTube channel, so we really appreciate all the advice and support we get from you guys, all the feedback. And of course, we're gonna screen share Mr. Tone Vase. So I don't have his website up. We got to screen share Mr. Tone Vase's Unconfiscatable conference coming to Las Vegas, Nevada, January 24th through 26th. We got a lot of great people that are going to be there, guys. A lot of Bitcoiners, Jimmy Song, Tone Vase, and even the great Trace Mayer that's on the show today is going to be there as well. So a lot of great Bitcoiners, a lot of great discussions going to go on. Looks like there's about 43 tickets left at 0.15 per Bitcoin. So with that aside, let's stop the screen share and get right into your guys' Quit Bits section, where we go over the news real quick of the week, and then we'll get into the introductions of our amazing panelists. So here we go, guys. Really quick, we got the Samorai Wallet has just announced their hardware Bitcoin node coming early 2019. So that's going to be pretty exciting. A lot of these companies, guys, are starting to announce these Lightning nodes and these Bitcoin nodes, these full nodes. Their hardware, which comes preloaded with the Bitcoin blockchain, already ready for you guys to go. So really helping developers move along here in the ecosystem. Really excited to see this. And then we got Nym Technologies, which is pretty great. These guys have been doing a lot of privacy-focused technology for Bitcoin. So I'm really excited to bring you guys this news. But they are focusing on a new privacy-oriented wallet that can offer network level anonymity for privacy-centric cryptocurrency. So they're working on an actual wallet that's going to be able to work with privacy as well. Really interesting stuff, guys, with mixed networks, things like that. Pretty interesting stuff. Check that out. And of course, as always, guys, I have the links in the show notes below. And then we got Square's Cashapp just overtook Coinbase as the #1 Bitcoin buying app, which of course is music to my ears as a fellow Coinbase hater out there. Really glad to hear that more and more people buying Bitcoin, of course, even in this especially in this bull market. And then we got a new Custodial Lightning wallet, which is pretty cool, guys. This allows you to receive tips without running a node. So it is a custodial, so they do hold your keys and things like that. But it's pretty handy for what it is, which is just this little tipping wallet, which is really cool to be able to check that out. And we got people joining, so I'm just going to mute Francis real quick. But this is pretty interesting, guys. So check out this wallet. Again, this is just more examples of people using Lightning Network for what it's made to be. Really interesting stuff. Check that out. And then speaking of Lightning Network, we got the first ERC20 token swap actually happening on the Lightning Network from Bitcoin to an ERC20 token. Check that out. That's really interesting on Bitcoin Magazine. And then also from Bitcoin Magazine, looks like they put together a crypto holiday guide, guys. Check this out. This is really cool if you want to give some gifts to some fellow Bitcoiners and crypto people in your list. Definitely check that out. And then we got this is pretty interesting too from Mr. Thomas Lee, the market analyst, the famous Bitcoin bull out there. He's trying to say that Bitcoin's fair price right now is around $13,000, and that's of course debatable, but that's what he's basing his data on, based on the inputs and outputs of this of what he's measuring there. And this is pretty interesting. Mr. Trump has announced that he will be naming Mick Mulvaney as a new acting White House chief of staff, which is pretty interesting because he's a pretty well-known proponent of Bitcoin. That's pretty interesting. And then another beautiful anti-Coinbase story, guys, today. Coinbase has been slammed recently by a lot of people on Twitter for basically saying that the recent Zcash airdrop is sort of an advertisement strategy. And we've seen this in the past. We've seen things like BCH, we've seen things like Dash, we've seen things like other coins like this try to pull publicity stunts, under the guise of course, of spreading awareness and freedom about crypto, right? But in the end of the day, nobody's even really able to actually use the crypto that they claim is for these people. So some sad stories on that. Hopefully this one is going to get better. But again, guys, it's really difficult to to get actual good on the ground reporting from these countries like Venezuela. So I really recommend you follow people like Adam Meister. He has people from Venezuela on the show all the time, and we even try to have people from Venezuela on the show from time to time. And then finally, the Israeli search and development arm of cryptocurrency mining giant from Mr. Bitmain himself, from Mr. Bitmain, the company will close, resulting in the firing of all 23 staff due to the market turmoil. But of course, we know it's not just the market turmoil that's causing the cracks over there at Bitmain. It is their horrible business strategies and methodologies and their practices that they've been doing over the past few years. So with that aside, guys, let's go ahead and get into the introductions here. This is, of course, a panel show, so we want to get to the discussion. So let's first introduce Mr. Hass McCook, a chartered civil engineer and MBA from Oxford. Mr. Hass, how you doing today? Oh, no, he's muted. Sorry, guys, don't forget to unmute. I always forget to tell people that. All right, Hassan. Let's go ahead and introduce our next person. Of course, joining us as always, guys, Mr. Francis Puleo, CEO of Satoshi's Portal. Francis, how you doing?
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm doing well. I'm doing great. Thanks, Vortex. I'm actually CEO of Bull Bitcoin now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's Bull Bitcoin.
Well, I'm still CTO of Satoshi Portal technically, so that's correct. But yeah, since Bull Bitcoin merged with, since we merged with Bitcoin Brains, yeah, we got the new name going there.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So we'll change that to Bull Bitcoin. Of course, we did a show about that, guys. So I really recommend you check out last week's Bitcoin news show where we talked a lot about Bull Bitcoin. Really good stuff in there. And then we got Dhruv Bansal joining us, physicist, CSO, and co-founder of Unchained Capital. Dhruv, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Vortex, and everybody else for having me on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate it. Dhruv has some amazing articles. Both Dhruv and Hass actually has been interviewed on the network here before for those amazing articles. So really recommend everybody check that out. Very thought-provoking stuff. Dhruv even has an article that might change your whole mindset on how Bitcoin works. So really interesting stuff. Really highly recommend check it out. And then finally, of course, guys, a special guest today joining us, Mr. Trace Mayer, Bitcoin OG, host of the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast and early Bitcoin investor. Trace, how you doing?
Oh, doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Let's stir up some fun.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show, Trace. Your episode that we just aired on the network a few days ago was getting more views than the previously most important or the most popular show on the network, Bitcoin News Show. So, Trace, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down a little bit, stop being so popular. But no.
It's kind of how it happens. My bad.
So that's what happened. Right? Trace comes on the show, guys, and the views go up. That's just how it works. So, again, Trace, really appreciate you on the show, man. We got a lot to talk about. So, before we get into the topic, I know that's close to your heart, Trace. We're going to talk first a little bit about the this article that came out recently, guys, on Bitcoin Magazine. It's really sort of resonated with me, struck a chord with me. So I thought we should make it a topic. It was a bit of a slow news week this week, so I kind of want to maybe have it more of a discussion. But this is really interesting. So basically, this article, guys, is really great. It's called "Bitcoin as a Declaration of Monetary Independence." And I really think that this is important because a lot of people view Bitcoin as an investment, a financial instrument, things like this, more related towards money. But it's actually, in my opinion, a lot more than just money. In my opinion, of course, it also is like this checks and balance sort of system against our current traditional fiat system, which up until now, for millennia, has never been really checked and balanced. So this is, I think, a big thing that resonates with me because remember, of course, I follow only the Federal Reserve on Twitter to try to bring back awareness to the original reason why Bitcoin was created. And of course, it was to provide competition, right? To provide this checks and balance for the traditional system. So I want to hear from the panelists what this article sort of meant to them and if it resonates with them as well. So we'll start out with you, Trace, first. Trace, what did you think about this article? And of course, this guy's a great guy who wrote the article. He's been in Bitcoin since 2013, starting the Bitcoin Center in New York. What do you think of this guy's opinion in this article?
Yes, I've known Nick for years in the space. Been to the Bitcoin New York Center down by Wall Street, and Nick's a fascinating character because he's been so involved in the political process. And, everybody's got an opinion about everything. But the opinions that really matter are the ones where you put your money to it. I happened to be in DC last week taking care of some business stuff. And I had some free time. So I went to the Lincoln Memorial. And there's engraved down on the marble there facing the Washington Monument is "I have a dream," from Martin Luther King. And, Martin Luther King, he showed us a lot of the strategy when it comes to actually effectuating political change. And yeah, they had lots of sit-ins. They had lots of different ways that they moved the civil rights movement forward. But where it really started to, like, where the rubber really started to hit the road was with the boycotts. You know, it's when they started putting their money, like, and hitting people in the pocketbook. And the founding fathers knew this. This is why they put it in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the Constitution to coin money, so it's something coined rather than printed. And then they restricted the state's ability to make anything legal tender. So obviously the federal government can't make anything legal tender because it's not in Article 1, Section 8. And the states, they can only make stuff legal tender if it's gold and silver under Article 1, Section 10. And so these monetary metals, they're not barbarous relics, but they're essential checks and balances in the political machinery, which I think Nick is getting at. Now, the problem with this is that first, the executive, with Executive Order 6102, made holding gold illegal, basically to demonetize it and give preference to Federal Reserve notes. And then they promptly inflated it from $20 an ounce to $35. Confiscating money, you know, power of the purse, which should be with the individual, with sound money, and then delegated to Congress. But executive just took that. So then Congress, you know, they made it legal again in the 70s, part of Ron Paul's movement. But what they didn't do is they didn't clarify issues like in the Kayer case, where you have a dollar that's defined as silver and a dollar that's defined as gold and Federal Reserve notes, but then there are taxable issues involved with using that, you know, which shouldn't really be that way. And then you also had some gold clause cases that were left over from like the 6102 issue, and it squarely framed the issue of what a dollar is in the City versus Dover case in 1991. But the judiciary, the U.S. Supreme Court, they refused to hear the case. So we have the executive branch acting unconstitutionally. We have the the Congress acting unconstitutionally, and we have the judges acting unconstitutionally when it comes to the monetary provisions of the U.S. Constitution. So what recourse do you really have besides, you know, as Friedman and Hayek and Mises and Rothbard have all talked about? You have to have some clever way to introduce sound money in a way that can't be censored. And so that's why I think in the Austrian School of Economics, it was focused mainly on the limited and amountness of the money in the 19th century. But in the 20th century, it's focused much more on the censorship resistant characteristics of the money. And guess what we got with Bitcoin? Oh yeah, we got limited amount and censorship resistance. And so that's why I think Bitcoin is such a big deal, you know, and we'll get into it, declaring your monetary sovereignty by holding those private keys yourself. Because back with 6102, you know, he stationed IRS agents at all the safety deposit boxes. So you could take your dollars out, but you couldn't take your gold out. You know, and then introducing criminal penalties and stuff like that for holding this inert yellow metal. So, you know, the institution of the state, they like to really infringe on this issue of monetary sovereignty. Lenin, Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Maduro, you know, down in Venezuela, everybody's done it. They all do it. Why? Because when you centralize trust, it becomes a giant pot of money for them to go and steal and loot. And that's one of the reasons why individuals have to claim their monetary sovereignty themselves. And if they don't, they're just eventually going to get whatever value they have in a softer money confiscated. You know, so you have to adopt the hardest money that's available technologically, or you're going to be outcompeted by those who do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Skin in the game. I mean, and this is what, of course, Safety and talks about too with easy money. It's really difficult when the entire financial system itself has been corrupted. Like, what recourse do we have? And this, of course, like you say, Trace, is why Bitcoin is just so important to people who understand that we didn't have a choice. We literally didn't have a choice until Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the exit sign, and it's just so important when we see when outlined from you, Trace, so intelligently how all of these systems one by one have gotten corrupted, and at this point, there's literally nothing left that the individual can do except invent something outside of the state. And many people predicted this, right? Friedman, other economists, people have predicted that something like this would come along because it was inevitable. There was literally no other choice. So something has to come along at some point to provide competition for it. And of course, it was any competition was squashed really, really quickly. But now with Bitcoin being unsquashable, decentralized, right? That's something that is going to be far more difficult to do. And like you say, Trace, it's so important. Bitcoin allows you to claim that financial sovereignty, right? If you don't act, you will be acted upon.
Yeah, and so let's make another point about this. You know, I cited the monetary provisions in the Constitution, but we have other provisions that have likewise been corrupted. Unreasonable searches and seizures. How about freedom of speech? What have we seen just recently? We saw massive deplatforming through things like Patreon. You know, so you know, if you want to be able to exercise freedom of speech, you have to have money in order to do that. You know, and should money be equal to one and all, or do we want to build in political bias into the money? You know, gold doesn't care. Like it serves its master equally well. Like it doesn't care if you're a Nazi. Like it is, and that no, and that's what the Third Reich did. They used the interest rate mechanisms in the Reich Bank and the central bank in order to conscript in the economic productivity of the European continent to fund their war machine. You know, and gold didn't care because gold is equal to one and all. You know, same with Bitcoin, same with, but the U.S. dollar. I mean, the mere fact that you can have sanctions shows that it's not equal to one and all. And so, you know, these are all going to be massive issues for humanity to discuss. You know, do we really want freedom of speech? You know, because along with you have to have the cat pictures and you have to have that reprehensible speech in order to get the Galileos and the Copernicuses and the Isaac Newtons, right? Like you have to have the ability for dissent and the ability for public opinion and ideas and a marketplace and all of that. And so, you know, my position's always been the answer to bad speech is more speech. If you have to resort to censoring speech, it just shows the weakness of your own position in my, you know, so and that's what we're going to see is we're going to see, you know, now that Bitcoin has been released onto the world stage, we're going to see a lot more tools being built to satisfy market need. You know, like in the case of all these deplatforming, which, you know, oh really, you think that like attacking somebody's pocketbook isn't going to motivate them? You know, like look at WikiLeaks was one of the first to have the banking blockade. And guess what they did? They started accepting Bitcoin, and then it promptly went up 50,000%. And so, like WikiLeaks benefited actually from being deplatformed. It just took a little bit of time and decisions on WikiLeaks's management side. But that's what I think we're going to be seeing is just there's just this massive trend of decentralization. It's going to be happening with 5G. It's going to be happening with the press, as if it hasn't happened enough already with newspapers and TV stations, and like Operation Mockingbird just doesn't really work very well anymore with everybody having their own blog and YouTube channel. And so we're seeing a decentralization of the press, and that means it's going to be so much more difficult for a strong man to garner public opinion like a Hitler or a Stalin or an FDR or even an Abraham Lincoln. And because the marketplace of ideas is going to be so much more fractured. So I think this is all going to be a very interesting time going into the future, because individuals are going to start declaring their monetary sovereignty because they don't want their savings inflated without due process of law, which is a form of confiscation and taxation without political checks and balances. And people just, you know, they're not going to stand for this, because at the end of the day, governments and other institutions like GE or whoever have these defined benefit pension plans. They've made a lot of promises that they can't keep. So you're going to have to protect yourself from a bunch of these zombie companies.
Yep, great points, Trace. I want to get to the other panelists as well. We see Drew. Let's go with Drew next. Drew, Trace had some great points. We see some of these companies respond to some of these draconian laws, right? Like WikiLeaks was mentioned, and of course now we have Gab, right? Sort of responding as well. What is your response to that in the conversation so far, Drew? What do you think about this article? Go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I like this article. I think, it's coming on the 10-year anniversary, right? Which is, of course, proof of keys and all that good stuff. In these past 10 years, I sometimes think, whose power has Bitcoin really taken away so far? I don't think anybody's. It's made a few people rich. It's built some good technology has come out of it so far. I think it's got a long road to go down, and hopefully it makes it all the way. But so far, it's pretty ignorable. It's threatening. Maybe if you understand it, you might understand what it could become, and you might be threatened by it. But I think a lot of people who it will disrupt don't understand it, and so they have ignored it. But man, if it continues to grow over the next 10 years at the same kind of rate it has in these past 10, it's very soon not going to become something that people can ignore. And at that point, people's power will be disrupted. And a call for independence for Bitcoin and so on, or Bitcoiners, might sound premature in 2018, but it'll sound less crazy and a little bit more serious as time goes on. And I like this article in particular calling for unity because that's refreshing. It's always good to hear that. But I think if Bitcoin is going to succeed in the long term, I mean, it will be a political issue. And political unity is a good place to derive strength from, because there will be pushback as Bitcoin continues to grow. Expect instead of being ignored, to be pushed back against. And a little bit that makes it easy to make it about sides, but I don't think it is about sides. It shouldn't be Bitcoiners versus non-Bitcoiners, or Bitcoiners versus altcoiners, or what have you. It should be, I think, to some of the points that Trace was making, it should be about the people that want to have this conversation versus those that don't realize it's something to talk about quite yet. So again, I think some of that stuff in that article, it's awesome, but it does feel a bit premature today. I don't think that'll be the case in the coming 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of these things seem premature. A lot of these things seem premature, really. And of course, we know that Bitcoin, right, is just this little drop in the bucket as far as the world's liquidity, and that it is early days, and we're only 10 years in. But man, we all see the potential, right, of the future. All of us here today, we see the potential of what could be if there were hundreds and hundreds of millions of people out there claiming their financial sovereignty, holding their own private keys, hundreds of millions, and maybe even a billion plus. Once that happens, and that will happen, because Bitcoin with its limited supply is going to coerce and entice and influence everybody, to be able to incentivize everybody to be able to eventually hold some piece of this network. So that is, of course, what we see, Drew. Great points from you. We have to constantly check ourselves and remember that we're still very, very early in these days, but we do have a long ways to go. But I think we can definitely see the path, and some of the steps that Trace, like somebody like Trace, is taking right now with his proof of keys may seem pretty immature, but when we get this ball rolling, right, that's the idea, is the snowball effect. As Bitcoin continues to grow, we want these types of ideas to continue to grow with it. Otherwise, of course, we just have another centralized financial system. So very, very important to get articles like this, I think, out there, and opinions like these out there for the people to be able to chew on and think about, instead of just, of course, be left in the darkness. Let's go talk to Mr. Hass himself, Mr. Hass McCook, whose name I love saying, Hass McCook. I love saying it. Hass, let me ask you, what is your opinion so far on the discussion? What do you think about this article and the discussion so far? Go ahead, the floor is yours.
So a lot of people always ask me, why'd you get into Bitcoin? You here for the tech, or you here for the money? I say I'm too dumb to understand the tech, and I don't care about the money. I'm here for freedom. All right. So the other day, coincidentally, probably timed along with the release of this article, I was asking people, what do you value your freedom at? Personally, I'm willing to die for freedom. But now, thanks to Bitcoin, there is no need to die, and Bitcoin's effectively a popular revolution, and you don't need to put much skin in the game to have a dog in this fight. So to me, I value freedom currently. The fiat value of my freedom is 20% of my wage every week. Some people say freedom cost about $350. So let's say you tip $3.50 in every week. That's what I call the 50-cent challenge, 50 cents a day. So apparently, I did some research back in August, which I released. Put the user base at around 50 million users. Cambridge Alternative Finance School just released a massive report the other week confirming those numbers, saying about 38 million ID verified revolutionaries fighting alongside us, and they make the assumption that about 40% are active. So let's say we have 10 million revolutionaries tipping in 50 cents a day. That's enough to buy the entire block reward for a day. So let's say people value their freedom at more than 50 cents a day. Let's say a cup of coffee a day. Let's say $5 a day. So that's that's 20 million going into the fight for freedom on a daily basis. So exactly what Trace said. This isn't about shilling and pumping. This is about putting your money where your mouth is and participating in the grind. But other than that, what can I say that Trace and Groove haven't already said? But I know Francis. I think we've possibly left the best to last over here.
I know Francis is chopping at the bit. That's why I save him for last sometimes. But before we get to Francis, I just want to say great points, Haas. Great points. It's really always difficult to follow up Trace and Drew. I had to follow up Trace, once at a meetup in Denver. It was not easy, but I tried my best. So again, great points, Haas. Thanks so much, man. Let's get Francis in here. Haas had some great points. Francis, he's like, I'm not in here for the tech or the money. I'm here for the freedom, right? And that's, of course, in fact, what I said on Max Kaiser's show the last time I was on there. I definitely said, he asked me, what is Bitcoin to me? And of course, I responded with Bitcoin is freedom. It's so many things to so many people, but at the end of the day, that is the underlying, philosophy, the underlying bit that I like to chew into. And again, of course, this being a voluntary movement, Francis, this is not going, we don't have war machines, right? We don't have tanks anywhere. This is a battle. In the battle of information, Bitcoin really is our sword. And this is something that I think more and more people are beginning to realize. So Francis, let me ask you, what do you think of the conversation so far? What do you think about this article? Did it resonate with you? And are people going to eventually realize that Bitcoin is completely neutral, and it's going to be into the hands that need it most?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the article resonates. I mean, I also visited the New York Center in like 2014, and like Nick is probably the same kind of profile that I started out with, which was the libertarian angle. So it was definitely like a liberty, freedom, political freedom angle, mostly around, I would say, restriction on financial transactions, which got me interested into Bitcoin. And then I started to learn about the tech, which I was not a techie. So it started out for me about the liberty, and then the tech, and then the money. I was an economist before I got into Bitcoin, but I was not into monetary economics and monetary history, which are topics that you don't learn about in school and that you don't use professionally when you're an economist. I mean, everything that I've learned about monetary economics, I learned after my master's and after all my training, just on the internet. And also, Trace, I got interested after your talk in Bitcoin Expo Toronto 2014, which was a fantastic talk. And I was actually looking for just the video a few days ago. I was like, I think it's recorded, and it was really fantastic. And I really always remember that part where you talked about Faust and about that reference by Goethe about the idea that printing money was something evil. And speaking about financial sovereignty, there's three kind of angles to it, two that are kind of similar. You have censorship-resistant transactions, right? So that's freedom of transaction, freedom of disposing of your wealth. And there's the bearer asset, unseizable bearer asset of Bitcoin aspect of it. And there's also obviously the monetary policy. So one thing that I actually left, and I went to, as Trace was talking, I went to pick up this book, which is Notes on the Establishment of a Monetary Unit by Thomas Jefferson. And this is a very unknown document, actually. It's kind of hard to find. It's only on the Library of Congress website and in this paper copy. And in this book, Jefferson highlights like the monetary direction that the US was going to take after the revolution. And it was a very, very sophisticated analysis, exchanges with Newton, for example, like letters with Newton. And they decided on a gold standard and a silver standard, both gold and silver. And the idea was that you didn't want the people to have their wealth seized in a sneaky way, essentially via devaluation. And I'm just going to read a passage from Jefferson here. And also really funny, one of the units was called the bit. So 1/10 of a unit. So a unit was like something like 33 grains of gold, and a tenth of that was the bit. I thought that hilarious. So, the quantity of fine silver which shall constitute the unit being settled, and the proportion of the value of gold to that silver. So they established like a fixed ratio that nobody could devalue. A table shall be formed from the assay before suggested, classifying all sorts of foreign currencies. And where it gets really interested is here. It says, they should be lawful tenders at those rates. So gold and silver were going to be the legal tender of the U.S., declaring the worth of a pennyweight or grain in each class. They shall be lawful tenders at those rates, if not clipped or otherwise diminished, where diminished offering their value for them at the mint, deducting the expense of recoinage. So if you had like a coin that was chipped off, you would go to the mint and they would melt it again and remake it whole. And here's the cool part. Here, should cooperate with Congress in providing that no money be received or paid at their treasuries. So he's talking about banks and governments. So no money received or paid at these treasuries or by any officers of the government or any bank, but on actual weight. So you couldn't fractionally reserve gold. That was Jefferson's own words, making it a criminal in a highest degree to diminish their own coins. So Jefferson argued that it should be a criminal offense for banks and governments to devalue their currency. And what we see is like, even though Jefferson, which was one of the founding fathers, actually argued to Congress, like, we need to make this hard money because people will just want to diminish it. They will not be able to stop themselves. We need to make it a criminal offense in the highest degree. And, criminal in the highest degree in the 18th century, I mean, that's like pain of death, right? I mean, that's a really harsh punishment. I mean, these guys weren't screwing around. So I think the lesson here is that monetary independence was not ever possible. Even if in the Constitution they were arguing for it and they were making provisions for it, it is literally impossible to stop the lust of people for creating money. So the first part of the monetary sovereignty aspect is, of course, that the monetary policy is decided by the people who run their own nodes, and nobody else can change it. So the Bitcoin's monetary policy is the most difficult to change. And the reason why is it most difficult to change is that Bitcoins are censorship resistant and they're also bearer assets. So why is it that governments were able to basically get off the gold standard is that they centralized all the gold, right? And that they were able to actually physically seize the gold. And we're talking about, the Nazis, the Bank of International Settlement, which today determines basically every country's monetary policy, was founded because they were able to seize gold, and they had so much gold that they used the gold that they seized to create fiat currencies and back them with the gold originally. And eventually they realized that, nobody's redeeming the gold. Nobody cares about the gold. Nobody cares about the monetary policy. Let's just print money without backing it with gold and see what happens. And nothing happened. Basically, nobody rebelled. And the process of inflation started to happen. And somehow people got convinced over time that inflation is like, the winter, there's inflation every year. Winter comes every year. And it kind of became this natural phenomenon. And nobody really asked questions about why my bus ticket was 30 cents when I was a kid and now it's $3. Nobody asked the question. It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's inflation. Inflation happens every year. So the second aspect is obviously the censorship transfer of wealth is what gold was not able to do to compete in the information age, right? So you can have gold and hoard it and protect your wealth, and nobody can actually seize it. I mean, gold is as unseizable as Bitcoins in a way. I mean, you have a backup in your house, right? You have a mnemonic in your house. It's physical, or government comes to your house and puts a gun on your head and say, "Give us your Bitcoins." It's like having gold and burying gold somewhere. Like it's as bare as gold. But you cannot transfer gold over the internet, which is a huge problem, and you can't send gold over the mail without getting censored, which is a big problem. So because gold is not censorship resistant, it was not able to fulfill the promise of monetary sovereignty in the digital age, right? We want people to have monetary sovereignty as an end in itself because it's good, but also because it allows them to do commerce and do business and to create wealth. So if you can't use it over the internet and you can only use it in the analog economy, in the non-digital economy, then gold is not going to be able to compete with other fiat currencies. So these aspects of these are the core identifying features of Bitcoin that make it different and unique from the other ones. A lot of people tell me, like, what's the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum fundamentally? Well, the big difference is that in Ethereum, you really do have 2 or 3 people that now can change the monetary policy. So users don't have monetary sovereignty because they don't run full nodes. You can't run a full Ethereum node. And even if you do run a full Ethereum node, the way that the whole ecosystem was deployed is not really decentralized, because everybody's just gonna, everybody's using third-party exchanges and services, so that if Vitalik, for example, and Joe Lubin want to change the monetary policy, you can bet your ass that my Ether wallet and Parity and Coinbase are going to get on board. And ultimately, people are not able to enforce proactively the consensus. Oh yeah, I can validate the blockchain, but proactively block. Segwit to X, for example, is the thing. Blocking Segwit to X is when I went like all in and I told people to buy Bitcoin for like the second time in my life after the bear whale, which was once we were able to demonstrate that no, you can't even change the size of the blocks. Like the rules, you need to have full consensus, and full consensus does not mean 90% of the hash rate. It means every single user that has skin in the game. So that's a huge aspect of monetary sovereignty that Bitcoin has. And then ultimately you're like, okay, so why is Bitcoin valuable? Like, what are the unique features that you cannot reproduce? Because a thing is only valuable if you can't whip it out of thin air, right? And you have immutability, censorship resistance, trustless validation of the blockchain. And these are all 3 things that ultimately serve people's monetary sovereignty. So monetary sovereignty is the killer app of Bitcoin. It's the use case. So you can have this cash equivalent. So cash is somehow censorship resistant because you can't, it's a push transaction and there's no intermediary. But cash, also like fiat cash, does not fulfill the promise of monetary sovereignty because of the devaluation. Gold has some of the properties. So Bitcoin is like, when I say people like, what's the elevator pitch? It's digital gold, because it's a finite amount and you can create more of it, and everybody can self-validate it. Like gold, you can melt it and recombine it. You can change the content. You can bite into it and make sure it's real. You don't need a third party to tell you that it is gold. You receive money, you have it in your hand, and you check it out. It is censorship resistant, just like cash. So it's digital gold and digital cash. So I was reading today when Timothy C. May died, like this week or a few days ago. I started reading some of the early cypherpunk readings. And monetary sovereignty is something that people have been dreaming about for a long time. I encourage our readers to read a book called The Sovereign Individual. If they really want to read about how to become like a sovereign and what it means to become a sovereign person in the digital age, The Sovereign Individual is definitely one of the books to read, and monetary sovereignty was one of the big themes of that. So Bitcoin actually allowing people to have monetary sovereignty is like a science fiction idea almost that's coming real. And the last point I'll make, Vortex, before I stop my monologue is I think a lot of Bitcoiners are interested in property rights and human rights, and how the institution of like how the creation as a society of a constitution where the majority cannot infringe on those rights, and really having this very strong social contract that when we're born, like the fact that we are born means that we have rights that are inherent to our existence as humans. And this is kind of like the basis of Western civilization, liberal thought, like the recognition that the rights aren't granted by the government when you're born. They are inherent to you, and we institute a government to enforce them and to respect them. But we have to institute a government to make our rights respected and enforced. So they are inherent to ourselves, but we can't self-enforce these rights because we need the courts and the police to some degree to protect our property rights. But with Bitcoin, you have self-enforcement of the property right through cryptography. That means that you can exercise your right to transfer your own wealth or to keep your wealth yourself without having a third party authority that you're delegating some part of your freedom to enforce these rights involved. So from a philosophical level, it is the first practical implementation of property rights that are full property rights that are without third parties, because you're enforcing it yourself. So talk about sovereignty, right? Talk about not needing the institution of government to protect your rights. And government was always the least worst thing, we could do, because we knew that we needed to have something out there to.
Oh no, Francis got cut off. The government cut him off,
That
guys.
was, and Bitcoin. Oh yeah,
Sorry.
did I cut off?
Yeah, you
I
cut
was
off, Francis, but it's okay, man. We
Right.
we got to get Trace in here because he's got to get going.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
really appreciate the points, Francis, and of course, I
Sure.
encourage everybody to rewatch that a few times because obviously there's a whole lot to unpack in there, a lot of great information. But again, I really encourage everybody to check out Satoshi's birthday. There's a reason why Satoshi chose that birthday. But Trace, I want to get your comments in here on the next topic before you got to go. So real quick, guys, Trace, I want you to talk about proof of keys. This is a really important topic. I think that we need to at least get out there. I know, as Drew said, this is maybe even premature, but I think we need to start this at some point, and I think there's no better time like the present. So Trace, go ahead and give us your understanding here, your pitch of what is proof of keys. Why should we all pay attention to this January 3rd date?
Yeah, so first, Satoshi didn't really do anything by accident, and there's a really critical reason for January 3rd. There's an Easter egg. I put it in a video back in 2014 explaining it, so I'm surprised nobody has found it yet. But anyways, January 3rd, we had the Genesis block. That's when he released the Bitcoin network out there. And so I was like, we need a new cultural tradition in Bitcoin. So I started proof of keys. And this is where we celebrate this Genesis block. There's more information at proofofkeys.com. But the essence of it is that you claim your monetary sovereignty on January 3rd. You withdraw every Bitcoin you've got at third parties, whether it's an exchange, whether it's a gambling site, like whatever it is, and it's just good Bitcoin hygiene to do that. But you withdraw it to a wallet or software where you hold your private key and you do your own network consensus. And Francis talked a little bit about why this network consensus is so important. I got a little Bitcoin fork here. And when you develop this type of technical literacy, you might be able to make some money with Bitcoin forks because you've got some technical know-how to do it safely and securely. But that's kind of the gist of it. Is we ought to be combat ready to enforce our monetary sovereignty. I 30% of my ancestors signed the Declaration of 30% of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and 30% of the Constitutional Convention are actually ancestors of mine. Like, I have founding father blood like running through these veins. And they had to actually go out there like in the winter and cross the Delaware. They had to, and they didn't even have shoes. They were leaving bloody tracks like in the snow. They pledged to their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. In this case, claiming our monetary sovereignty doesn't cost us money, it makes us money. Like, look at, if you've been involved in this movement for a number of years, you're doing pretty well, hopefully, financially, because we're transferring wealth to holders of Bitcoin. Anyways, like that's part of this is, the way that you actually get out on the battlefield is you actually demand those Bitcoins and you do your own network consensus. And that's where you have an economically substantive transaction that you're doing full validation for. And that strengthens the Bitcoin network because then we got more nodes, we got more economic decentralization, we've got people holding their own private keys, so you don't got giant honeypots at Coinbase or wherever. And so that's really the genesis behind this new cultural tradition that I've started for the Bitcoin community and the crypto community in general. Withdraw all your Dash, withdraw all your Ether, withdraw all your Bitcoin SV if you got any of that. Like, take all the keys back from any third parties. Why? Just to prove that they can send it to you. Because if it's not on the blockchain, it didn't happen. And if there's anything we've learned in this industry and through history, it's that these large centralized third parties abuse the trust. And so if you don't do it, or you don't have the skills to do it, you're going to get wrecked one of these days. It's just the way it's going to be. And so, get yourself combat ready to be out there on the field and then actually, strike some blows for monetary sovereignty by getting it put into the blockchain.
Awesome, Trace. Really, really appreciate the time. Great points. Again, guys, if you want to claim your financial sovereignty, then you have to take those coins off. We try to tell people time and time again, Trace, not your keys, not your coins. So really, really appreciate the time to come on, Trace. Thanks again for so much of your comments. Again, guys, that website is proofofkeys.com. We're going to keep talking about it here, but Trace, we'll let you go now. And we know you're a busy guy, but thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. With lots of travel and everything. Glad we could actually make it work. And we're all in it together. Oh, and Mr. McCook made a great point about how there are 50 million of these verified accounts. And, if you look at chain analysis, there's only maybe 10 million coins out there that are active. So, and you talked about how Tone's conference costs 0.15 Bitcoins for a ticket. Well, that's about how many Bitcoins there are for every verified KYC AML user out there. These coins are very short in supply. And so if you want to know that you've actually got them, you have to take possession of them. You got to claim that monetary sovereignty, so and we're going to find out whether all those coins are out there or not. If people actually demand them. And if you demand them, then hey, you've got them. And the first rule of panics, do it first. There are only so many seats in the lifeboat. You might as well have yours. So thanks, guys. Ciao.
Absolutely, Trace.
See you guys.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. Thank you, Trace. That's right, guys. Have a freaking seat on the lifeboat, guys. That's what you want to do. That's what we try to tell people. Of course, just like Adam Meister, we try to tell people value your wealth in Bitcoin. This is just really, really important. You have to claim, your financial sovereignty. That's why we're here. That's why I follow the Federal Reserve to bring awareness back to the reason why we're all here in the first place. So I'm curious to hear everybody else's comments on Francis's topic, as well as what Trace said. So let's go back to Dhruv here. Dhruv, what is your comments? I'd love to hear your thoughts on both Francis's comments and the proof of keys.
Man, for Francis's comments, that was just a good, long monologue that I feel like a person should just listen to at high speed while they jog or something.
Like over and over again too. Like not just once, dude. Not just once.
Yeah. A lot of good information, a lot of good things. If you've not heard of some of the stuff that Francis was talking about, you should definitely check it out. But maybe I want to go on record as saying, if it sounded earlier, like I said, that I think proof of keys in particular is premature. No, not at all. I broadly agree, and I think it's an awesome idea. I was referring to the idea of political independence for Bitcoiners or something being a little bit politically premature today, but really one day might not sound so crazy. But as for proof of keys, no, I think it's a great idea. I want to contextualize it a little bit in the context of what's been happening. Like, in particular, man, I don't see how we could have gotten to $19,000 per Bitcoin and all the volume that we had and all the growth that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general have had in 2017 and this year. We don't get there without centralization to a certain extent, without easy to use exchanges that frankly obscure a lot of the complexity of what's really happening on the blockchain and make it simple for dads to use, right? We needed some of that, and we needed to make it really easy to onboard and act as sort of payment rails, just get all these people into the system. I started in Bitcoin years ago with Coinbase. That's where I bought my coins. And they made it easy, and their interface was really good, and I felt like it was trustworthy. As I learned more, as my coins became worth more, I got them out of there. But that's a place you reach. It's not a place you start out. And so I think, and it's easier than ever to get your coins out of the exchange, like hardware wallets, the Samorai node that you mentioned, a bunch of other software. There's a lot of folks starting to think about this because more and more people are reaching that point of sophistication or, hey, I've got a lot of funds here that I really want to protect. So, for me, it's not really about vilifying at all centralized players in the space. Like, they've done an awesome job so far, especially places like Coinbase, safeguarding a huge amount of cryptocurrency and being a target the whole while and managing through it. So kudos to them. But yeah, let's move your stuff off of there if you feel sophisticated enough to handle it. I would just warn that it is not an easy thing for a casual person who's not really computer savvy and maybe isn't willing to do research and isn't willing to think a little bit for themselves. If you're not that person, you probably are better off leaving it on Coinbase because they will do a good job for you. But if you can manage that and you embrace some of the ideals that have been talked about in this session, absolutely, getting it off the exchange is hugely important. I might color it and just put a little bit of nuance there that these aren't the only two options. Like your life is not necessarily, it's either on the exchange and I have zero control, or it's 100% custody with me and I'm the only person that can protect this thing. Like these days, multi-signature is starting to come out as an actually accessible way to give you something intermediary. Like my own company and a few others are releasing now technologies that make it easy for you to retain sufficient ownership of the keys in a quorum that you can still say it's yours and that you're sovereign, but have redundancy that lets you get protection just in case, the worst happens, your house burns down, the bank vault disappears, something like that. So it's becoming easier than ever. It's politically the right thing to do. It's how Bitcoin was intended to run. It is the inevitable swing of the pendulum back in the other direction now, away from centralization. And so I think everyone should try it out. Yeah, proof of keys. Let's do it on Jan 3rd. I already did it years ago.
Exactly, Drew. I think everybody here on the panel probably did that. But again, this is for an education for the masses we're trying to do here. And, I'd really like your points again, as usual, Drew, killing it. Really like your points. We're not trying to vilify, centralization, though it may seem like I vilify central banks, right? In the Bank of International Settlements, things like that. What we're really trying to do is just educate, right? Bitcoin is an exit sign. It's an option. If you don't want to get your keys off this January, maybe next January, right? Maybe the January 3rd after that. But the point is to keep coming back every January 3rd to remind you that, hey, look, guys, we're still here. We're still holding our keys. We are still providing and growing this layer of hodlers of last resort. So I think that that's really, really good. And as you mentioned, Drew, there is a bunch of centralized but non-custodial solutions out there too, which is really great because you, again, like you said, you get to maintain that sovereignty. That's what's really important. You mentioned your own solution, and then HODL, right, is an exchange. They do something similar where you always are in control of your keys no matter what. But they are, of course, a centralized company there to hold your hand and help you and provide support. So that's really interesting. Really like your points, Drew. So let's go to Haas next. Haas, what is your comment so far on the discussion so far? What did you think of Francis's talk, and what do you think of this proof of keys?
So with proof of keys, when I told you a little earlier that I was too dumb to understand the tech side of Bitcoin, when it comes to keeping coins off exchanges, you can call me Einstein. I'm from Australia. We don't have a Bill of Rights here. And for better or for worse, the Americans have something extremely important. It's called the Second Amendment. So I don't have access to that in Australia. So my Second Amendment is Bitcoin. My only defense against tyranny is financial sovereignty. Now, if you're in America and you support the Second Amendment, why the hell would you keep your guns at the gun range? It's as simple as that, right? If you've got the right to hold a gun, you hold it at your house. So Bitcoin should be absolutely no different. So keep your guns at home, be ready to fight, and basically pack that safe, to its full capacity. So
absolutely.
So those are my thoughts on proof of keys, because like I said, for better or for worse, not many countries in the world have the Second Amendment. So our only hope really of freedom is this new digital Second Amendment called Bitcoin.
Absolutely,
so
great points.
Wraps up my thoughts on both independence and proof of keys.
Yeah, man, I love it. This is true. I mean, like Trey said, I mean, there's pretty much, the system is pretty much completely corrupted at this point. And like you say, Haas, there's not even a whole lot of countries to start with that has a Second Amendment. So, we see that, and of course, through time and coercion and ownership over the media, they can get people to completely forget what fiat even is, and hundreds and hundreds of years, and and the millions of deaths that have gone to fighting for things like financial sovereignty. They can just make people completely forget. A couple of cat videos and an MTV special, and there you go. And so this is why it's important for people to understand that, look, we're not trying to get every single person in the world, right, to understand exactly what Bitcoin is. That's not what we do here. We're simply here to educate those who want to take the responsibility of financial sovereignty. Not everybody is going to do that, and that's fine. Bitcoin is here to provide an exit, and just existing, just being Bitcoin is enough, is such a huge, powerful mantra to understand, because that's why I have that on my Twitter profile, because again, just it existing is enough to provide a bit of a counterbalance a bit of a counterbalance to the craziness that we have of this crazy fiat system. So very, very important. And again, guys, research Satoshi's birthday. Very, very, very important. You know, as the elevator, this is why we use this elevator pitch for people, for new people in the space. We do say digital gold, you know, because again, this allows you to have your monetary sovereignty, and it's just so important. I want to hear from Francis next on this. Francis, you know, great monologue. We of course love all of your monologues here on the show. It's become something of a tradition to have you have a monologue on the show. So we really appreciate it. Again, just want to maybe get your final thoughts on these topics that we had. You know, for about the article, and then of course about on Trace's proof of keys. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe first comment. Actually, this is the first time I'm with Haas on a podcast, and I like Haas because it's just short and sweet and like to the point, like the contrary. But let me build on that a little bit.
Yeah, Haas doesn't mess around, dude. It's always concise, and it's his articles too. Like if you read his articles too, it's very concise. They're like 9 parts, but they're still very concise.
Yeah. No, that was great, and I love that analogy. Actually, I use an analogy for like full nodes, which is like a full, and I use 2, right, depending on the crowd. Like a full node is like a condom, you know. You'd rather have one and not need it than need one and not have it, right? So you're definitely better off having one in your back pocket, because it's only important when it matters. And I use the same analogy with a gun, right? So you'd rather have a gun and not need it than need it and not have it, because your life is going to depend on it. And if you have it, you want it to be maintained, you want to know how to use it, and you want to know how to point and shoot, and you want it loaded. And like when you pull the trigger, when you point a gun, I mean, you better be ready to fucking pull the trigger. And it's all about this preparation. So obviously, I'm not going to participate in the proof of keys exercise at all, because I don't have coins on exchanges. I own all of them, and I've always have. Even in my business, I'm actually losing money from not being able to hedge properly all the time, because we don't want to leave any coins on any third party, also at the business level. So because to me, and like, I've had money seized in bank accounts and PayPal. That's not fun. And I'm telling you, like, a lot of money seized for a really long time. That's a really feeling where you feel so vulnerable and inferior, and you feel like powerless. And the bank ombudsman is like, "Oh, thank you for your complaint. Like, we'll take it up to no one because I'm the ombudsman." There's no one to complain to. There's the only thing that you can do really is like make some noise and like make people look bad in the press. That's pretty much it. And you can really only do that when you're someone that's known, right? So it's incredible how easy it is for people to have their assets seized, and it happens all the time. And once it happens, you're screwed. I mean, there's nothing you can do, right? So it's kind of this thing where there's no like protection once it happens. Once it happens, you're done. Like think about crossing the border, for example, with some cash. If it gets seized by the DHS, I'm sorry, you're not going to see that cash. I mean, you might see it in like 7 years after you win your lawsuit or something like that, and after you win in the appeals court, and maybe after you win in the Supreme Court, because you know these guys are funded by hundreds of millions of dollars of government money, fighting obviously to have the precedent, to keep it precedent. But I mean, so this exercise is absolutely fundamental because there's only 2 ways. There's like 2 cardinal rules of Bitcoin, and these are like the 2 only things that you need to worry about. And I love Haas's comment, which is like, I'm not a techie, but I know what a private key is. I know what a backup is. I know what BIP38 is, or I'm going to learn about BIP38. And if I don't know what Shamir shared secret is, I'm going to be Googling that after this podcast. And if I don't know what a multi-sig wallet is, I'm going to try to stay away from multi-sig because it is a bit complicated to get it right, because it involves the policies. But you can definitely look into multi-sig for like a company or something like that. It's a great solution. But truly like a hardware wallet, I'm like the target of a lot of hackers, and they have hacked my phone, my emails. They've got into exchange accounts by resetting passwords through like phone and stuff. Lots of stuff. And I sleep like a baby. Like I'm not afraid of anything. And because of the way that the key ownership, I did it. I mean, I go around with my Trezor. I travel with my Trezor. I have multiple backups of the Trezor. Obviously, I have decoy accounts. I have 2 of 3 backups for my Trezor, like 2 or 3 Shamir circuit backups for my encrypted backups for my mnemonic, and this just allows me to be absolutely like stress free. Another good point is definitely the ownership of the Bitcoin itself. I mean, that is the reason why you own Bitcoin. Like the reason why you own Bitcoin is because you can own it and you can validate your own transaction. If you're not actually doing it, you're just speculating on the price, and that's fine. If you're not actually doing that, it's like owning a stock. Like you don't care if it's a bearer asset, the stock. Like you don't want to have a physical bearer part of the stock. Sure, you're just speculating on the price, and that's totally fine. Yeah, so use your own keys to exercise monetary sovereignty and run your own full node. I'm happy Trace brought that up because it's not as, I guess, crucial right now to run your full node, because again, that
but it
only
will be. But it will be, and that's why we started now. But yeah,
like
sorry.
No, and you're right. I mean, for the average, let's say there's like 10 million Bitcoin users. I would say there's about 100,000 Bitcoin nodes out there. Like people place the number at 8,000 because they're not looking at the private connections. Like with other tools, like we know there's like more close to 100,000 nodes. So you got a very small amount of Bitcoin users that are running their nodes, but these tend to be Bitcoin users that have a lot of Bitcoins. So they have a lot of the users that have a lot of skin in the game. They'll be running their own nodes, and that's what you want. But using your own keys is like super easy, and there's like really no excuse. And I love Haas's comment. If you're going to support the Second Amendment, like don't leave your gun at the gun range. So if you're supporting my financial sovereignty, it's kind of a difference between, am I virtue signaling here, or am I a revolutionary taking back control of my assets and my wealth? And like owning your own keys is definitely the latter, right? If you're not using your own keys, then you can leave them on an exchange for a little while. But leaving them just on an exchange is just completely missing the point and just speculating on the price. And obviously, running your own node is definitely important. But as an average user, like you should start by using your own keys, because by definition, like you can't use your own node if you're not using your own keys, because you're not going to be choosing like, well, you can, but I mean, so there's a lot of cool things that are coming out, and I think. To Drew's comment, it is hard for the average user. And yeah, sure, like Coinbase did it well for the beginning, but in 2016, Coinbase should already be selling branded Coinbase treasures and ledgers on their site, and they should be saying, "Oh, we have this app in Coinbase which allows you to sign and broadcast a transaction from your trezor." Right? So that's not hard to do. Like a ledger.
Coinbase is not in a position, I don't think, as a company to encourage you to take coins away from them. That's
but they could be. They could still have done it while making a profit.
But I don't think that they're going to do it because I mean it takes. I mean, that's literally what my company does. But my company has never been desirous of having control over your coins. That's never been our goal. It's never been how we've sold ourselves. So we very much want to help you do this. Like Francis, you apparently now. Everyone in the world knows you travel around with your trezor. God, man, please get into multi-sig with someone. Let's talk about it afterwards. But yeah, I don't think that's a really great point to bring up because Coinbase could absolutely do this. I don't think they ever will. I think a company that's more likely to do it is Square.
Yeah, totally. And that's an example and the reason of why Coinbase is like a really shitty company and why I really hate Coinbase. And I do hope they go bankrupt. And I'm sorry, like, yeah, of course in the beginning, like they did some good things, but they blew it completely. And they're now trying to take Bitcoin and crypto into a direction. Like they were not I don't think they were ever a Bitcoin company. I think they were a fintech company that used Bitcoin to launch its platform. And then obviously in the process, did bring a lot of value to Bitcoin, but it's like, yo, if you've been there for 5 years and you have not evolved at all, you've just hired more salespeople and like you just got bigger. And like, you know what? I don't think they're gonna last because I don't think they're gonna last too long. I think people are gonna be competing on those kind of things in the long term, on the values and on the best practices that are in there. Like for example, like at Bills, we don't have a wallet. You need to have your own Bitcoin wallet to use their service, and that kind of sucks as an exchange because you need to have all these like people are noobs and they're like, oh, but where do I send my Bitcoins? On your own wallet. You need to download Electrum, you need to buy a Trezor, you need to do this. And like, oh, can't you just host the Bitcoins for me? Well, no, I don't want to host the Bitcoins for you. And like, what kind of Bitcoiner wants to host Bitcoins for other Bitcoiners? Like the kind of Bitcoiner that wants to steal those Bitcoins. Like the only reason why I would want to hold someone else's Bitcoins is to have leverage over them or some reason. Classic family member.
It's like the classic rent-seeking behavior, right, France? Yeah. That's what banks have. That's their profit model for millennia.
And
Yeah, no.
I'll just make the point that someone who
Yeah.
literally does take leverage and helps Bitcoiners get leverage, I do have. They're in my debt, so to speak, in the debt of the
Right.
company that I run. But when we give loans, we try to be as transparent as we can. We share keys with our borrowers so that at least they have some representation in that quorum. We obviously can't give it all to them because then it wouldn't really be collateral anymore. But like you can do and build financial products in the spirit of the technology, or you can pretend that it's not a bearer instrument and then ignore that part because it's complicated and then just go replicate what banks already do. I think that latter strategy is very tempting because it's much harder to deal with it at the protocol level. But I think that's the only way to build companies that will survive in this space, is to admit to yourself that there's something categorically different about it because it's a bearer instrument. Start from there and decide how you want to build going forward.
Totally. And I think what's great about Bitcoin, and this is like a quote that I was reading from Timothy C. May. It was like, he said, privacy is the ability to selectively reveal yourself to the world. And with Bitcoin, it's the ability to selectively give away parts of your sovereignty as you need it. And in your case, I mean, it obviously is required for the service to be delivered. And I don't know if you know this. I took the first Bitcoin back loan in Canada, and I'm an advisor of Ledden, which is Canada's like I don't know I didn't know your company, Drew, but I'm assuming it's probably similar in some respect to lend, like you're taking Bitcoins in, and I mean that's great. That's actually amazing because the whoever is issuing the loan actually owns the collateral, and it's like a liquid collateral. It's like amazing for loans because eventually the collateral required is going to be much low over time. Now it's expensive to get Bitcoin loans relatively, but over time it's going to be much cheaper than fiat, because like if you're taking a fiat loan, you have to convince the bank that they can liquidate your assets at a certain price and they can seize it. But if you're putting like Bitcoins on collateral at a bank or something like that, like they know they can liquidate those assets at any time. So I'm assuming that the rate will be low. But that's the whole point. Like you don't need them to be on the exchange for longer than the trading period.
I want you to make the further comment, Francis.
Yeah.
When you take that loan, it is not true that it's your loan originator's property. It's still your property. That collateral is still yours, right? And so even more so, you should still have keys associated with it. So that's just the way that we think about it.
Oh, well, totally. And I think technically this is a challenge that is not impossible to solve at all. I think right now on Lend, legally you own the coins, but they're physically in custody. But I'm absolutely convinced that, so, you know, these guys are gonna, they have also this mentality to get away. And I mean, to get away to have partial custody, right? And I think some people should not underestimate the technologies. A lot of people think like, okay, so Bitcoin's like peaked in terms of technology, and it is pretty good. So, you know, we got like partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which make like custody much better. But there's crazy stuff coming down the pipeline that people cannot even think of right now, and they're going to be made possible by something called Merkleized abstract syntax trees. And these are like, let's just call them, we can add conditions, more conditions to smart contracts. Like I will, for example, I will create a logged transaction. Does it come back to me if I do X thing? And if I don't do X thing between X year, that money is going to be moved to like a multisig of 2 of 3. And if these 2 of 3 multisig doesn't do something within X parameters, it's going to go back to another 3 of 5 at this time. And you can have very complicated layered solutions. Like a lot of the problems with custody are not only like I'm not technically able to do so. A lot of it is like estate planning. So if I die, like what's going to happen to my money, with my Bitcoins, with my treasure? If I'm incapacitated, what can I do? Or if someone that's involved in the multi-sig disappears, or if one of my business partners disappears, like how do I get the money back? And these are all technical challenges, right? And policy challenges are going to be made much easier with these technologies. So yeah, you selectively give away your sovereignty when you need it. And if you don't need it, you're just a fool to give it away, because they're giving it away for free, right? You're not getting any advantage leaving your coins on Coinbase. And they're going to be starting to make the withdrawals of the coins much harder. Even Coinbase, you know, they don't withdraw to Canada. If you're a Canadian user of Coinbase, you can't withdraw Bitcoins. So what do you do with Coinbase? Like buy and you sell? So you're like, why would I not trade on exchange if I'm going to just buy and sell? Like it makes no sense. So they will selectively make the withdrawals like harder and harder and harder. And they're going to make the withdrawals like de-anonymized, like for sure. And by the way, if you're going to do proof of keys, might as well mix your coins while you're at it. So if you haven't mixed your Bitcoins in a while, I've been using like oxt.me tools. I've been doing like manual blockchain forensics and tracking of other people's coins, just because sometimes I was curious, like, oh, I see Bitcoins coming in, and I can kind of reverse engineer like people's like, did they buy Bitcoin a long time ago, or are they getting paid in Bitcoin? That's really, it's super easy to know. I can know if you're a big term holder or if you're getting paid in Bitcoin. And that already, like, I got a lot of info on you right away. I can know if you're a miner. I can know if you're a miner and you're lying that if you're a miner. Like, it's real. I can know which exchanges you're using, like, relatively easily, because
So this is why we push Wasabi Wallet.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And mixing tools so hard, because really Bitcoin is transparent, and that's great. We want we want a transparent network by default, but we also want the ability to without permission be able to mix our coins, be able to add additional layers of privacy at our leisure.
Yeah, and if you've ever forked your coins and you haven't mixed them, do it now, because everybody knows where all your money is, essentially. If you forked Bitcoins and you sold the forked coins, everybody has a history of all those Bitcoins. And usually a lot of people, they forked it and they sent it to Bittrex in one transaction, or they sent it to some exchange in like one big transaction. And then boom, all your Bitcoins history is there. So proof of keys, mix your Bitcoins, and don't bring them back on the exchange, because you don't need to. Just once you like, the point is not like once you've withdrew them to your wallet, don't send them back on January 4th, right? That's not the point. Just keep them there and like learn how to do it. Like, oh, I'm too scared. Oh yeah, so you're gonna learn how to do it once it's too late, and like once you don't rush into something in crypto. Like, do it now, because when you want to do it, it's exactly like the gun argument. Like, clean your gun, go to the range.
Exactly. That's what Trace is always saying, right? Trace is always saying that, look, do it when it's on the maritime, right? Do it when it's nice. Do it when the sun is shining, when the skies are blue. You don't want to have to do this under a crazy situation of being hacked or something worse. So, we want to do this now. So great points, France. Looks like Francis is done. So great points. I want to make some final points, and then I'm just going to go through one more, everybody, to get their final comments, and then we'll go ahead and close the show. So thanks, guys, so much for watching. But Francis made so many good points, dude. Coinbase is a bank. They will continue to make withdrawals harder and harder. PayPal is a bank. They didn't start out this way, but they became this way. They are now 100% banks. And remember, Coinbase was always started with that Silicon Valley mentality. They were always going to get owned by a bank. PayPal was always going to get owned by a bank. They weren't using, they didn't really care enough, and in PayPal's case wasn't using the right technology, right? But in Coinbase's case, they literally just didn't care. They just wanted profits. They saw profits, and that is what they went after. So again, just remember, guys, January 3rd, we're really trying to push that for people to be able to educate themselves. We're not saying, every single person in the world remove your coins forever and ever and ever. We're trying to say educate, guys. Learn how to move those coins. Learn how and learn why it's important. And that's what's really important. We want to reduce the honeypots. We want to reduce the risks of hypothecation or rehypothecation. And remember, this is not just for Bitcoin. This is for everything. This is for all of crypto. Anything that requires that private key, right? Move that off of these centralized exchanges on January 3rd. Again, just to learn. We're trying to educate. We're trying to prevent things. We're trying to do a lot of great things. And remember, even I don't remember if it was Francis who mentioned this, but governments they will never, ever, ever, ever resist the ability to print money. They will always, always, always devalue. They will always, always, always print. I don't care what the government is, how great it was. The history has shown us relentlessly, time and time again, they just won't resist us. So we eventually had to create something like Bitcoin. It's something that is government resistant, something that is an option outside of it. And all of these other coins, most of these other coins, guys, Zcash and some of these other coins, they are centralized to the point to where they can be taken over by a government. They are not government hard, and that is what drives Bitcoin. That separation of money and state. That is embodiment of Bitcoin. Bitcoin embodies this statement, right? Separation of money and state. This is the point of Bitcoin. So that's what's we really want to get across. And the value of owning a Bitcoin, guys, is the value proposition. Owning the Bitcoin is the value proposition. Value your wealth in Bitcoin. Let's go one more time, guys, through everybody, and then we'll end the show. So, Drew, go ahead and give us your last comments here. Let us know what your final thoughts are. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Vortex. No, this is a great show, man. Custody issues are so near and dear to my heart. Using a Trezor for the first time helped me learn and understand at a deeper level how Bitcoin even works. And I was already a programmer. So there's something about that familiarity that really helps you level up, like Trace was saying. So I got to say, it's a great idea. Like everyone who has Bitcoin, who wants to either challenge their understanding or who wants to send a message or who just wants to make sure it's really theirs, take your coins out, put them in a hardware wallet or a full node or some other kind of software that you trust on your own. And if you have trouble trusting yourself, you might want to consider a company like Unchained Capital to help you, with collaborative cold storage stuff that we're working on, as well as, you're not giving up your right to access services. You can continue to use distributed exchanges. You continue to use loan providers like ourselves. You're not leaving the system. You're just exerting more control over it. And in particular, if you're a guy like Francis, who because he works in Bitcoin, has to deal with it every day. If you have to carry around a Trezor, even more so, consider multi-sig services. But regardless, get your stuff off of the exchanges.
And these services, these collaborative cold storage services, they are going to prop up more. There are going to be more and more popular. People like Druve and Cashapp, who are sort of ahead of the game already, are going to probably be some of the winners in this space. But this is going to be really, really important. The ability to have this multi-sig, this handheld where it's not quite 100% custodial. They don't own your funds, but they do own a little bit of it, so they can help you to recover, right? They own one of the keys.
Yeah, it's redundancy without loss of control.
Redundancy without loss of control. Very well put, Drew. And so that's what's really important, guys, the ability to own that custody. And this is the magic that Bitcoin does. And, just really quickly, Francis mentioned Mast. Some of these technologies that are coming out in the near future, Mast, with Schnorr, combined with Schnorr signatures, guys, and then combined with Lightning, guys, look, it's going to blow your freaking socks off, the amount of things that you'll be able to do with these basic primitives once they are at scale. And in mass, I'm telling you right now, these technologies are going to be combined in such a way that it will be able to do every single freaking thing that any other alt is hoping to dream about. And of course, it will be over this, decentralized government hard money. So it's really, really important. Mr. Hass McCook, Hass, go ahead and give us your final thoughts, sir, for the show. And again, man, really thanks for, really appreciate you being on.
I'll be typically terse here. Freedom is the only thing that matters, and the price of freedom is whatever you determine it to be. Whether that's $1 a week, $350 a week, or $350 a week, you've got to commit and pay a price for freedom, because it's not free. And I think it should be a regular weekly commitment, just like a tithe to a church or a donation to a charity. And you can consider your weekly, daily, or monthly payments to the world's biggest economic justice and freedom charity in the world. So maybe, all due respect to the Red Cross, maybe don't give them the $10 a month, and give that to the cause of global freedom and economic justice.
Yeah, great points, Sass.
Billions of people poorer.
Yeah, man, I love it. Great points, Hass. And man, what a great point. Freedom is not free. Freedom was never, ever free, guys. We've always had to fight for it. So level up, claim your financial sovereignty. And again, Hass, thanks so much for joining us. Hass is over there in Australia, so it's like 6 a.m. over there. And so we really, really, really extra appreciate Hass taking the time to join us. So thanks again, Hass. Let's get one final statement from Francis, and then we'll end it. So go ahead, Francis. The final thoughts, my brother. Final thoughts.
Oh, I really like the way that Hass kind of phrases it, like it's the cost, like you're just paying for your own freedom. And what's really cool is like you make this donation, right, to the cause, but it's not really a donation that much. It has the effect of a donation, because when you're buying and holding Bitcoin, you're actually making Bitcoin more valuable for other people that are helping the network. But you're also securing yourself. So Bitcoin is this self-funded revolution, and just kind of, I think I've told this story before. I met one of the early Bitcoin devs that is working on a really important project, and I was like, a project that was defunded, but it still has open source contributors. And I was like, so what's your gig? Like, do you get consulting? Like, what do you do outside of Bitcoin dev? And he's like, nothing. He's like, I have a bunch of Bitcoins. Bitcoin took care of me, made me rich. So now I'm gonna, take care of Bitcoin. So getting buy into this movement actually gives you an incentive to participate, and it's great. And sneaking that in there, dollar cost averaging. Some people are saying it's a bad idea. They're so badly wrong. Like JW, if you're listening, like it's a terrible idea to get people out of dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging is really great. So if you can do that, that's really good. And I also love I don't know who's talking about leveling up, but I really like this concept and this kind of call to action, because there are some Bitcoin masters out there. You can be master at Bitcoin. You can download your blocks from space. You can use command line. You can use the Electrum command line with your Trezor to craft some crazy transactions without knowing how to program. So there's always like a better version of you in Bitcoin. You can always be a better Bitcoiner. You can always have better privacy hygiene. So if you feel like you're like, okay, I think I've got this now. Okay, so now how about I mix all my Bitcoins by default? Like, okay, let's try and do that. It's like, don't stop at the basic part, because you're definitely not taking full advantage of Bitcoin. And last comment is, Drew, I just looked at your business. I didn't actually know what you did. I just looked at Unchained Capital, and it's very similar to the yeah. So it's very similar to one of the companies I advise. Is the only company that I advise actually outside of my own. And the reason why I advise this company is because I think this is a great business model, and this is what Bitcoin needs. And like, I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. I definitely want to leverage the Bitcoin, because I'm all in on Bitcoin, right? So I don't have any fiat. Literally every expense that I have is exiting my Bitcoin position slightly, right? So I should definitely use this more, and I encourage people to get into that. And I think what's great is that you can innovate a lot technologically around this business model, because it makes money. It's not like a stupid blockchain idea that doesn't make money, and it's not an exchange which has zero innovation going for it right now, because people just have such a low standard. I kind of feel like, when I'm giving Bitcoin to a lender, I'm expecting like higher standards somehow than an exchange, for some reason. And I think there's like a good opportunity to have like real users with real problems and like innovate on that custody and all this system. Because
the only lender right now that I think thinks about the world that way. A lot of lenders, I think, come from that strain where they don't worry about the custody problem. They just put it on an exchange and then they move on.
That's nuts. That's completely crazy.
We funded all the loans just ourselves out of our own pockets. So we were our own capital providers. That's terrifying. That meant that I needed to know that the collateral was safe. It needed to be cold storage, multi-sig, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, Francis, you and I agree on this. Like, this is the right way to build financial services going forward.
Oh, totally. That's like music to my ears. Like the fact that you put your own Bitcoins first as like the first loans, that's like fantastic. And this is the way that I also did with bills. Like I build like this service in a way that I will be like not ashamed to show my friends that are Bitcoin OGs, and like that a way that I'm actually like very confident in it. So I mean, I think again, like this proof of keys thing, this custody thing, it's kind of like the run your own nodes was like the theme of like the last of 2018. We saw Casa, we have Cipher we have Nodal, we have so much more. There's like 8333.io, which I thought was really cool. So that's kind of the whole industry is moving towards that. Like, let's make it easy to run your node. Let's make it easy to use your keys. And during a bear market, it's actually like a really good infrastructure time to build this, because in the bull run, everybody's busy making tons of money, like on trading, on exchanging, just holding and doing all sorts of stuff. So now's the time to like build those apps, and so that in the next bull run, when we got a lot more users that are getting into Bitcoin, then we're not rushing to make it easy for them. Like we're equally gonna. There's no like you don't, if you're having an exchange, like, okay, you can hire more customer support staff, but there's not a lot to do like in between these crazy market cycles. So yeah, let's focus on the custody and make it easy so that we don't have to worry about all these crazy security problems. And then the next time the bull run comes up, all these like FUD about, nobody owns their own keys, which is going to be like the next FUD. People are going to be like, oh, Bitcoin centralized, nobody owns the keys. Like Ethereum, like nobody needs censorship resistant computing. Oh, nobody needs censorship resistant money. Nobody uses their own keys. It's all that FUD. We can kind of diffuse it before. So yeah, thanks.
It's probably false right now. I dare say already, I mean, folks like ourselves and already people who followed the proof of keys movement, I bet there's more Bitcoin held off of exchanges and off of self-organized platforms, held on hardware wallets, held on offline computers, held on copies of Bitcoin D. I bet there's more Bitcoin like that even today than there is on exchanges.
I mean, there's only like 1 million coins floating, like at any given time in the world. I mean, there's only like 1 million coins free floating, maybe, if we're lucky.
Yeah, what we're proposing is not crazy.
No, absolutely. I think the nodes is going to be a tougher challenge than the keys. That's for sure. But the key ownership, I think we're definitely like on a good way. The technology is getting there. Node is going to be a bit more difficult because it's kind of like it's very easy for people to understand. I own the keys. I own the coins. That's like, you know, who owns the keys, who owns the coins. Like, I want to own my money. I'm gonna run my. But the thing is, like, are you validating your own rules? That's kind of more abstract. But yeah, I think we're definitely on the way. So great episode again, Vortex. I mean, this is an important topic. And is this the last episode of the year before we go to?
This is
All
the
right.
last one. So that's why I allowed us to go a little bit longer than normal. So just to wrap up the year, and of course you guys had some great discussions, so I didn't want to end it, but so I think we'd end it here. So great, Francis, great comments, great discussion, guys, and again, of course, Drew with his Francis approved Bitcoin company. You guys got to check that out. But let's just go real quick, find out where we can find out more about you guys. So again, just really, really appreciate everybody in the chat. Really appreciate everybody joining us. We had a great time. I hope you guys learned something. Drew, tell us where we can find out more about you, sir.
You can follow me personally on Twitter. I'm at Drew Bansel, and you can look up my company, Unchained Capital, at unchained-capital.com.
Yeah, check it out, guys. And then we got Hass McCook. Hass, where can we find out more about you and your awesome articles?
Yeah, so easiest place to go is Twitter at Hass McCook, and all of my links are there. Got a Medium page, YouTube page, LinkedIn page, academia.edu page. So check that out, and Merry Christmas for everyone going into the holidays.
Absolutely. And of course, guys, definitely check out the videos we did on the show with Drew, with Hass. We have we have videos on some of their articles here on the network. So definitely check that out. If you guys like what you saw today, you're going to love our interviews with both Drew and Hass. They have some amazing content to share. And finally, Francis, tell the world, where can we find out more about you, sir?
You can look at me on Twitter. So Francis Puleo _. Follow our new Bull Bitcoin Twitter, which is bullbitcoin _. We're going to be releasing a lot of memes. I mean, big part of my strategy is to win the meme war. Videos, all sorts of like funny content to sneak in the right values within this comedy. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You can check out my Medium blog. I haven't been active recently, but I have like a lot of posts that are backlogged. So Medium, Twitter, and YouTube, Bull Bitcoin. If you really want to kind of know what I'm about, you should definitely check out my announcement speech of Bull Bitcoin, which was more of a manifesto than a corporate announcement. I mean, I didn't even talk about the company that much.
Actually, you didn't. It was just like a call to a creed for Bitcoin, almost. Like, I love it.
Yeah. And at the end, I'm like, oh, by the way, check out our new company and new app. And so I just read Hass's article. And I am a Bitcoin fundamentalist, according to Hass's classification. It actually perfectly describes me. Hopefully, I'm not as easy to caricature as most. But yeah, so that's a great article, actually. A good call on that.
Awesome, Hass. Great. Yeah, thanks, Francis.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and obviously, Merry Christmas and have a good year.
Yeah, Bull Bitcoin, guys, check it out. It's going to be pretty friggin' huge in 2019, so you better learn about it now. And again, thanks, Hass, for your articles, man. Yeah, great stuff, dude. And everybody, again, have happy holidays. We really wish everybody have happy holidays across the planet. We know everybody listens from all around the world, so we thank you guys so much. So remember, we always have more shows coming on the CryptoCast, guys. We got another Bitcoin news show, of course, here every Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. And we have other shows, the Crypto Q&A show on Thursdays, and we've been releasing a new Bitcoin Matters about every Friday. So check that all out, guys. Lots of content to come, and we really appreciate you guys all being here. So until next time, please, guys, don't forget, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.